Andy Johnson. We are looking at constructivism, discovery learning, and meaningful verbal learning. Constructivism is a theory of learning. Theories explain a set of facts. It is part of cognitive learning theory, meaning that learning is not a behavior that you can observe. It happens inside the head. It's expanding schemata, developing new schemata, rearranging the file folder in your head. Learning here is an active process. You can't be learned at. You must learn. You must do something, even to be cognitively engaged, to construct knowledge. You don't replicate knowledge. I'm saying stuff to you. It's not going to be replicated in your head. Rather, you're using what's in your head to construct your own understanding of constructivism, discovery learning, and expository learning or meaningful verbal learning. So new knowledge and understanding is based on what you already know. That's why it is important to know what's in our students' head. What's in their head is used to help you understand. So current knowledge enables you to understand learning. Anything you already know about learning, learning theories, your own experience as learners, as teachers, helps you understand what I'm saying right now. There's no such thing as an objective view of reality, an objective view of anything, because we always construct our own view. It's always a little bit subjective, just by the way we perceive what's in our head. What's in your head right now, you are constructing an understanding of what I am saying. All your heads are a little bit different, so you're all going to get slightly different versions of what I'm saying. Now, if you go out and spend some years in the classroom, what I'm saying will make a lot more sense. If you're a beginning pre-service teacher, what I'm saying makes less sense, because what is in your head is used to understand anything you encounter. Now, learning is not a standardized process, simply because, of course, we all have different knowledge bases, but we all learn and process the world a little bit differently. So teaching should not be a standardized process. One size fits all, whether teaching reading or science or math, simply does not work. I see this even in my undergraduate students. One class is different from another. What works with one does not work with another. There is no standardized teaching and learning process. Good teachers build on what students know. They try to get a sense of where they're at. It's not simply dumping information off. Now, as a professor, I could just simply say a bunch of stuff, dump a bunch of stuff on your heads, but I try to get a sense of what students know or may know, and what I don't present is just as important as what I do present in helping you to understand. Now, there's two slightly different versions of constructivism, cognitive and social. Let's take a look at each. Cognitive constructivism, it's related to Piaget or associated with Piaget. Here, learning is an internal process. Curiosity drives learning. You have this sense of equilibrium. Something happens that doesn't make sense. You want to find out about that. A sense of disequilibrium, where you get this new information and you have to assimilate it, put it in a file folder that already exists. Or if it doesn't have a file folder, you must accommodate, restructure the file folder, or create a new file folder. That's that internal curiosity. It's an internal process. So the role of a teacher, related to in this cognitive constructivist thought, this Piaget types of thinking, is to arouse curiosity, to ask questions, to point out inconsistencies. Boys and girls, I wonder what will happen if... Boys and girls, did you notice that this is that, but it doesn't make sense? We have to read to find out. We have to see what happens when. That's the role of a teacher. Curiosity, internal process, as opposed to social constructivism. And both these theories are a little bit right, a little bit wrong. Knowledge is constructed through our interaction with the social world with other people, but our social world around us with media, etc. Thinking moves from outside to in as we internalize knowledge, ways of thinking, knowledge structures. We internalize it. It goes from outside to in. The role of a teacher then is to design social interaction around learning experiences. Cooperative learning, problem solving where you're working in pairs or groups, or project-based learning, working in pairs, or simply turn to your neighbor. In my classes, I like to have discussion groups, flip grids where you share your ideas, you explain stuff. That's social interaction designed around a learning experience to help you explain and process. Now, let's take a look at Jerome Bruner, observational research. I love this. He's watching kids, watching learning as it happens, helps us understand. Learning is a natural inclination. It's part of the human experience. We want to make sense of our world. We try to impose order on the chaos around us. We see a bunch of stuff and we naturally put it into groups and create categories. This is how human beings survived, how we evolved from the savannah to these big brain things that we are today. We use inductive analysis, which is inducing order on the field. You look at reality, you look at the field, you look for things that are the same for groups, you put things in groups, you go, oh, there's a bunch of winged things, those are a bunch of four-legged things, these are a bunch of duck-billed things. You're creating groups, you're inducing order on the field. Bruner said that much of learning involves constructing concepts, constructing that human beings do it best when it's through discovery, where you show a bunch of examples of the concepts, students look at it, look for groups, and discover the defining attributes. Now, a concept is a mental representation of a class or class of items. This is the concept of a triangle. But I would say, boys and girls, what's the same about all these shapes? Oh, they all have three sides. Oh, they're all straight sides. Oh, there's no doors in the shape. From that, we would construct, okay, a triangle has three sides. They're all pointy. That's how discovery learning happens. So good teaching enables students to grasp the basic structure of the concept first. You teach it in its most basic form so that they can add on to it. When I teach the concept of a lesson plan, I teach it in a very basic form. Purpose statement, input, activity, knowing that they'll get more complex versions of that later on, but it doesn't do anyone any good to give you the most complicated example up front just to confuse you. No, good teachers make things simple. They show you the most basic essence of that concept, the most basic structure. Keep it simple. Human beings learn best from whole to part. When you can see the whole puzzle first, then you know where the little pieces are. If you're engaged in the whole activity of playing tennis first, then I can teach you the little skills and it makes a lot more sense. That's whole to part instruction. They get a sense of the whole and then you can teach the basic skills. Now, Bruner said you can teach all concepts at all levels. Absolutely. If you break it down into its most basic components. When teaching first grade, I would teach geology. I wouldn't teach igneous intrusive rocks, but I'd have my students out there looking at rocks, putting them in groups. You can teach all concepts at all levels if you break it down into its most basic component. Now, he's known for the spiral curriculum. So instead of saying, well, I'm going to teach about amphibians in second grade and I'll cover all of amphibians and they'll have learned it all. You go, no. We teach these basic concepts every year and we address them and approach them and experience them at higher levels and in different places. So we revisit planned redundancy from year to year. So we see these concepts at ever expanding and higher levels. Key concepts and skills are revisited at higher levels each year. Now, in my courses, when I taught 3 courses in the same program, I could do a bit of this planned redundancy, where students would experience something in one class, they would see it again in another class, and a little bit differently at higher levels in another class. That's a form of the spiral curriculum. He's also known for disciplined inquiry, using the tools of that discipline to learn and discover To teach geology, I had my first graders acting like geologists, out looking for rocks, putting rocks into groups. Have your students using the tools of that discipline to find out about math or about science or about reading, about ed psych with my undergrads. I have them out doing ed psych things, out observing, out asking questions, out surveying. The tools of that discipline. Slight transition, discovery learning then. Discovery learning is where you create a structured experience first, and then you have the lesson. They mess around a little bit so they discover what you hope to teach them, and then you fill in the blanks. Now, discovery learning is not simply, go discover something. It's planned and purposeful. I want you to discover this about frogs or about science or about whatever it is. They have the experience first. They discover some stuff, and then you give them some input. Now, to teach a skill using discovery learning, they mess about first using the skill. They would discover some stuff. Then you give them specific input so it makes more sense. If you mess about first, you get a sense of the whole, and then what you teach makes a little bit more sense. That's discovery learning. Now, Bruner thought that discovery learning facilitates learning better than direct instruction, and he has a point, because you get a sense of the whole. You get personally invested if you mess about. Now, direct instruction is instruction first, and then the experience. Discovery learning is the experience first, and then instruction. Now, it's not a method, meaning you shouldn't use it for everything all the time. It's useful for teaching some things in some lessons, but not in others. Good teachers use both, and sometimes in the same lesson, you'll have maybe some direct instruction and some discovery learning. So it's not an either or, it's not a constant, it's not a method, it is one strategy of many strategies. Now, on the other hand, David Ausubel, another cognitive learning theorist, learning is a change in cognitive structures. You connect the new to the old. He emphasized the importance of structure in teaching so students can see exactly what they're learning and how one thing relates to the next. So they see that structure up front. It enables them to encode and process more effectively. He promoted expository teaching or meaningful verbal learning, what he calls it. Meaningful, it makes sense, it's connected, one thing to the other. Verbal, you're teaching, you're telling. He found that lecture, or he thought that lecture was the most effective in constructing new knowledge, telling people stuff, expository teaching. Now, like Bruner, he thought that teachers need to have a sense of what students know so they can get a little out in front and they can build on what they know. What students know is important. As a professor, I try to get a sense of what students know and build on that. I'm not simply just dumping information on and thinking they can make sense of it. A good professor is not someone, a good teacher, who just says stuff. We have to have a sense of what you know and just get a little out in front. In expository teaching, the structure must be readily apparent, so you can see the hierarchy, how it's broken into parts. And Ausubel used advanced organizers to show the structure of the lesson up front. That's any graphic organizer that shows the structure of what is to be learned in advance of the lesson or in advance of the reading. It could be in some graphic form like this, or it could be a diagram, or it could be simply an outline, but it shows the structure of what is to be learned ahead of the lesson, or what is to be read or read about ahead of the reading activity. The structure is readily apparent. When I lecture in my class, I have an outline. I always write the outline down so that they can see the structure of what is to be learned. Now, lectures, expository teaching, meaningful verbal learning, is a teacher-centered form of instruction. Discovery learning, the teacher steps back, students mess about. Expository teaching, the teacher is in control of all elements of it. It's transmitting. Knowledge is presented in its final form. This is what you need to know. This is how I'm presenting it to you. Now, lecture is appropriate at all levels. Yes, yes, yes. But in the kindergarten, preschool, maybe it's only 2 to 8 minutes. Eric Jensen, found out that people can only attend to things for a short amount of time at these levels. My college students, 15 to 18 minutes they can process, and then I need to have some activity. Now, this does not mean that lessons only go 5 to 8 minutes. You could have lots of bits of expository teaching, 5 minutes in duration, a little break, another 5 minutes, another break. For my 3-hour classes, 15 minutes activity, 15 minutes activity. That's how it works. Lecture is appropriate. Okay, that's the basics. Constructivism, discovery learning, meaningful verbal learning, or expository teaching.